Hey, so I am Gavin Hignight, and I'm the writer and one of the producers on Gundam Requiem for Vengeance. My fandom, how did my fandom plan on writing the series? I think the approach on the show was always to give people two things. One of which was, let's give Gundam fans a new angle. Let's give them something fresh. As a storyteller, you always want to have a fresh approach for people. At the same time, it was like, well, let's also tell a story that's compact enough where outside, non-Gundam fans, non-hardcore anime fans can see this and be like, oh, this is a really cool story. I want to see more in this universe. So I think myself as a fan, I really just wanted to kind of, and I think I try to do this in all the things I write, just try to make left turns when people expect a right turn. Try to break tropes and break stereotypes just enough to where things feel fresh. I think people, especially Gundam fans, know that the relationships are very complex, even on both sides of a faction, right? So you have drama on your own team and you have drama with those that you're fighting. And I think for me, one of the most, juicy kind of character dynamics to get into is the conflict between Captain Solari and Major Ronay at the recycling base. Ronay is, a superior, but he's kind of flawed and he's in over his head. And Solari is very battle-tested, she's very savvy, and they really have a difference of opinion on how to handle the situation, but they're not necessarily either of them wrong. And I think that was a really interesting, and that's the non-spoilery kind of version in case you haven't seen the series, but they're butting heads and, stakes are high, and the Gundam's on its way, and whose solution is best is debatable, and I think that's why Gundam series are always so enjoyable, because it is debatable. Our approach on the Zeon squadron and the pilots, audiences are like, well, these are usually the bad guys. How can you write them as good guys? And I think the Gundam universe already lends itself to all the grays. The Gundam universe is not black and white. The take on war has always been kind of traditionally in the gray. Honestly, when we sat down and started, concepting, or who these characters were, we really just wanted to be boots on the ground. It was really just focus on boots on the ground in the cockpit with the people who are fighting this battle. And that meant being with the soldiers on the ground, many of which all end up like reality in war for different reasons. And no one is truly evil. No one is truly altruistic and good. So the approach was really just to try to be real with this squadron and then build out from there. If you notice, one thing I kind of did with how I structured character, all the commanding officers feel like the Zeon They're the jerks, they're the bad guys. If you watch a Gundam series where the Gundam's the hero and you see the Zeon, our commanding officers in Requiem kind of have that feeling. Like you're like, oh, I love to hate these guys. Whereas our people in the cockpits, our Red Wolf squadron, they're a little more realized. They have different. They're different from each other, and then they're different from maybe what we would expect. I think if you look at Red Wolf Squadron, like Kale, our Zaku sniper in the first episode, he's like straight up Gundam bad guy. You could see him coming after someone in 08th MS team or in the original series, whereas Solari's, a little more complicated and not just bloodthirsty. So really we just started with that crew, with that squadron, and built out from there, and really just tried to show their story and their kind of survival story because of what they come up against. In the series, 6 episodes, we really had to think about balance between, action and drama. I've been lucky in my career to work with some really good head writers and showrunners that have kind of pounded into me, story structure and also just timing when you're looking at, like, say, 22-minute episodes. I had worked previously on a series that were 11-minute episodes that was dramatic with a little comedy. So that forced my brain, along with our team on that project, to really think about making the most of our time when we have it. I knew that with 6 episodes, we really wanted one big action sequence per episode. And we wanted it to be diverse. So if you were to break apart and start analyzing Requiem, you'd be like, well, the first episode is just pure craziness, right? It's just we wanted to drop you into the battle and not really let you breathe for an entire episode. But then from then on, it's like Zaku tank, versus Gundam, Zaku versus Gundam, Jim versus Gundam, which is a nice twist. Hopefully no one expects. So we tried to do a unique mobile suit battle per episode. And then, you can't have 22 minutes of fighting. You would get exhausted, you would be bored. So, it's character first, drama first, and then action second, but make that action really count. And I think that, our team at Safe House and Erasmus, they really brought the A game with the mobile suits. It feels so, you feel the weight in those sequences. So we have drama, we're invested in it, and then we get a really cool action sequence. So that's kind of how we approached on those scripts. So our setting, so we're kind of in Eastern Europe, and that's not an area that's gotten a lot of exploration. We knew we were gonna kind of run timing-wise around OMS team, which is, a different hemisphere. But really, it was just, well, there was 2 things on my side, one of which people hadn't seen a lot in that area, and 2 of which is, I'm working with a team at Sunrise with producers who know Gundam better than anyone. And there were, like Mr. Ogata and Mr. Kasaoka on the project, they are so vast in their Gundam knowledge that they're going to know what's happening and what's not happening in the Eastern Europe front, even though we've not maybe put it on media or screen before. For me, I was really fixed on, because, spoiler alert, where's the Gundam? He's kind of scary. He's kind of a specter or a spirit. There's a forest in Romania that is, it's a real forest that is haunted. And it has all these legends about it. And that's where we set the opening sequence, near Klujapaka base. So that was kind of the starting point for me, is it's like, we're in this battle, we're in like haunted woods, and who should emerge but, this evil-looking robot that's gonna take us all down. Or mecha, I'll say. I don't wanna get in trouble for saying robot, but mobile suit. How does Gundam compare philosophically and compared to other sci-fi that I've, series I've worked on? I think good science fiction always has those elements. And so you're always, it's not about the gadgets. I think a lot of like American movies, action movies, will set themselves in the future and label themselves as science fiction. But they're just action movies. I think real science fiction always asks human questions and human technology questions. And that is so at the core of Gundam anyways, that all we really had to do is stick to the rules of the universe and respect them, but try to ask new questions or find new angles. I think our approach to new types is a good example of that. It's an emerging evolution. It's emerging almost superpower for part of humanity, and we're early in that during this time frame. So, we tried to approach it where, some people don't believe in it. Some people think it's kind of a myth. Some people know a lot about it because they've already been investigating on it. Our, protagonist is kind of even self-doubting about it herself. But then you look at her career and her abilities, and then, by the end of the 6 episodes, you understand that she's also, because of someone she meets on the battlefield, getting more comfortable in those abilities or trusting them. It was a fun thing to lightly explore and not go too deep on. The characters and their mobile suits and that relationship. All good sci-fi and like war movies and stuff, you have a relationship with your, device, right? That is, helping you win the war or protecting you, especially when it comes to mecha and, because it is literally an extension of you and it is your protector. I think that to kind of pivot from, the question of the relationship between the character and, like, say, the mobile suit, one thing we really tried to do as a group with Requiem was explore the mobile suits more as like machines of war. So for us, it became often questions of like, well, what would it be like to be in this metal contraption when the power goes out? When you lose, like poor Solari, I lost count how many times her mobile suit gets an arm cut off. Sorry for that. But when you get cut down by a Gundam, what's it like? Because you go from being in your protector to being in your coffin really quickly. So we really, I almost sound like a broken record, we just kept trying to put ourselves in that cockpit with that squadron to understand what it would really feel like. Okay, so this is a great question. Which mobile suit from Requiem would I want to pilot? And did we, how did we create specifics? Easily, the Midnighters Goufs, or Goof if you pronounce it that way. I love that suit. I love the Goof ever since 8th MS team. And I think they're in it just enough. It's like we almost tease this really interesting squadron next to the Red Wolves. I love when the Midnighters come in, and they feel like Xeon too, that we're more familiar with. But it's also cool because you get to see the Gundam laying waste on part of that squadron as well, really heightening it. For me, though, the mobile suit that was most fun to create are the kit-bashed suits in the recycling yard. It was so fun to think about. Okay, I probably was very inspired by things like the A-Team that I grew up on, where like, the solution to everything was let's build something. And, the third act, let's build something. But I love the idea that, here's these people, they're breaking down these materials because like the war is so bad, they have to recycle anything they can get their hands on. And that's part of the conflict anyway. Xeon is tight on resources because of Earth. It's all plays. So of course in the battle, they would have recycling yards and Solari ends up at one and she's looking around and she's like, well, all the pieces I need to build our protector are here, but you guys just have to do the work. And Mr. Yamane, our technical designer, who is just, a massively talented designer and legend, when he brought in those first hand-drawn sketches of the kit-bashed, the junkyard Zaku, and they had like tank treads on them, and there was like the split shield, I got goosebumps. I was so excited to see, because we, on paper in the script, had come up with the idea with these like junked out Zaku. But to then see his thinking of them and approach and the cool stuff that didn't come from my head, I wish it did, it was really exciting. So I have a real soft spot for the junkyard Zaku, and I was so excited to see, oh, we're going to get them as models, we're going to get them as toys, because I really proud of bringing that kind of thinking into the universe.
No, 100%. And like kit bashing is very much a part of Gunpla, and to see it sort of an Easter egg so out in the open, I thought was very refreshing.
Totally, right? Yeah, it is super fun that like people who build Gunpla and enjoy the models are like, well, God, the characters in the show are kind of doing what I do if I kit bash something and make my own. So pretty cool.
It reminds me of that one kid in high school that just had a car that maybe had a different colored door than the rest of the car.
100%. And we wanted that. We were like, well, one of the legs has to be a different color, or the hand, or the shoulder. Because I think we all knew that kid who had that car, right?
Yeah. 100%.
The attention to detail on the timeline and the continuity, that's a tough, that was one of the hardest aspects of working on the show. And when we, in early discussions, went to Sunrise and we were talking with, the producers there, the question was, well, do you want to try to do an original take on Gundam that's not within the, Universal Century? Or do you want to try to do something in Universal Century? And we were like, we want to be in Universal Century. We want to do UC. We want to be part of, the big picture. And they're like, that's great. It's going to be a lot more work because of the continuity. But I think sometimes people will see like the person writing the show and think, of course I had to do a lot of research. I'm a fan and I've grown up watching series, but I still had to do research. But it's not like I have to carry all that weight on my shoulders, because we have these producers from Sunrise who've been with Gundam for a long time and really know it organically. And so we had great, every now and then something would be pitched or we'd be something, and it would get kind of course corrected by one of our producers, because they just know what would be going on at that time period with which technology and which mobile suit. And so we had a lot of help, as people new to the universe, from producers who know it like the back of their hand. How did we approach knowing we were going to use Unreal? I think that early on, before I started seeing any preliminary art, I just worked on the series like you would. Maybe in my head it looked 2D. Maybe in my head it looked like 08th or something. As I started to see art, I think that the first thing I saw that really fired my imagination was Erasmus had brought a kind of a test reel he had put together of the Zaku cockpit lighting up, all the consoles flickering on and stuff. And that really, I was like, then I started to understand we're really going to feel different. This looks incredible. Those consoles and those cockpits were so tactile and so real feeling that I think it helped us, as we kind of baked the creative cake, really think about the world in 3 dimensions versus maybe in like 2D cell or 2 dimensions. I think the other thing that Unreal just did incredibly is bring the environment to life. Those, like in that first episode, the forest, I love, I had shared the trailer with family and they thought it was live action. And they're like, until they, you get a little more into it and they realize that it was completely unreal. But it's fun to see that confusion on their faces, because they were like, well, I thought you were writing animation. I'm like, I am. it's that crazy looking. So I think you just approach story as story. But for me, as someone who, I can't even draw stick figures, no matter the project I'm on, once it gets to concept team, once it gets starting animated, every time I'm shown something feels like Christmas morning, because I have these things in my head that are very vivid, and I'm not the guy that's going to draw them out. But when we have these talented artists bring them to life, and I get to see that, I'm like, yeah, that's, often exceeds what was in my head because of their talent. So
right, that's the flip side. You can't limit yourself based on what technology exists now. You just have to go with what your mind can do, and it's someone else's job to bring that vision.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And, talk about a talented, team. Even with character design, it's, you're not in a vacuum. You don't make big series like this by yourself. It's a group effort, and you throw in all you got, and then other people do, and then you see things really like. I was thinking about our character Haley, who is our young female soldier with all the tattoos and stuff, and just to see her evolution from maybe what was in the script to what made it to screen, between like character design, like her crazy tattoos, all of which are very Easter eggy. If you really dig in and look, there's some cool stuff in there, to the voice actress who brought her to life. I just, you have a hope that what you put on paper will translate to the screen as vivid, and then there are moments when it really happens, and she's a great example. Watching the show, I was so moved by the actress's performance that brought her to life, and I think broke some maybe stereotypes or tropes that audiences were expecting based on her appearance. She was so vulnerable and so human for a Zeon, right? Like, we could really relate to her trauma, and that was a good example of everyone on the team had added something to make her who she is. Oni, our doctor, is one of my favorite characters. I think, right? Oni is like, he's the altruistic compass, right? Like, there's bad folks on the Federation side, there's bad folks on the Zeon side, or at least they're having to do bad things to achieve their goals. And then you have this like doctor in the middle who is literally there just to save lives. He's like the beacon of, like, we should all be Oni, really, if we want to be like someone in the UC. But how fun then to put him in a truck with, or has his life saved by someone who just, blew away the opponents. The kind of debate between Oni and Haley is, I think, one of the more satisfying dynamics in the show.
Yeah, 100%. Especially since she's way in on one side of the spectrum and he's in the middle, and they literally meet in the middle at some point. Like, they both have to. They witness things, they see things, they experience things in the course of like a night.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
There's so much change.
There's so much, and Oni's not one note either. There's a moment when their lives are at risk, and he jumps behind basically the cockpit with Lieutenant Heaton, and he's not and then we get a cool moment with Renee out of it that you are not expecting. So I think Oni was a really a successful approach. Yeah, the price of war. I think I will say that the complexities of war and technology in war, all of the themes that Gundam often explores. It's funny I say this because I've been a fan for years, but working on the show, and not even at the beginning, I had to write all the scripts, I had to go through notes with producers, maybe even, as we got into post-production, I finally kind of understood the enemy in Gundam is war itself. It's not the Zeon, it's not the Federation, it's conflict itself is the enemy, and it's something I think we should all take in and really meditate on in real life. It's a great teacher in sci-fi to pay attention to. As for moments, we were really inspired by the great World War II films and the randomness of violence and death that is unfortunately part of it. So, I think the opening episode, if we did our job right, you think you're getting one show and one mobile suit enters the fray and that show's gone. You're going to get another show. There are characters you thought you were going to get to know, and they're gone. But of course, we built to a climax, and that final episode, there's one moment that delivers, I mean, just literally the cost of war in one move. And I won't spoil that for audiences, but if we did our job right, it's like we tick up to that moment and we think, oh my God, people are communicating, we might be able to get through this, and then something happens. How did we create a Gundam series that would be fresh and enjoyable for, you know, longtime fans? But then how did we tell a story that's, you know, accessible? Because, you know, arguably to non-anime fans and non-Gunpla builders and non-Gundam fans, anime, and especially legacy IP, like things like Gundam that have been around for decades, can be really intimidating. And, you know, this was the first Gundam series produced with English as the primary language, which meant that, you know, I think it was part of our job. Let's get some new eyeballs. Let's get some American fans and English-speaking fans who might not normally go to the anime category on Netflix, right? Who might not normally seek out this type of storytelling. How can we get them? And, you know, to sound like a broken record, it was just about the characters and about getting into that cockpit and humanizing these people. And I think anime is always good at this. Maybe not as much Western media, especially animated media. We treated the audience like they were sophisticated. You know, we allude to things. Oh, you know, there was this conflict. It was kind of Easter egg-y in a way. You know, like this is a show about a squadron facing a conflict they've never seen before. That's a pretty familiar, you know, we've maybe seen that in other things, but then we lace it with, you know, references and nods to the universe. And I've talked to people who are Gundam fans who loved that approach, and I've talked to I'll say new Gundam fans because they had not seen a Gundam series before and watched this because it was on Netflix and because it was Unreal Engine, and it was just more accessible to them than some other stuff. And what was nice is what I've heard is it left me wanting more. It left me, what should I watch next? I think that's a real beacon of success that we were opening the Gundam door to some new eyeballs. But, you know, I'm a lifelong fanboy. You know, I'm a lifelong fan of this stuff, and I don't want to be left out in the dark. You know, I want special things, and so I think we have a cameo, you know, with Keller, that if you know, you know, and that was I couldn't believe. We pitched it, and our team at Sunrise, kind of quiet, you know, on the video call as they contemplate. Yes, let's do that. And I can't believe we're going to get Admiral Keller, because for me that moment when he appears it was like, okay, it's like a standoff. Like all your good guys are all pointing their weapons at each other. Nothing like this is as bad as it gets. Like what's the one force of nature that could change this or could break it up? And it ends up being Admiral Keller, which is so satisfying. He's so bigger than life. Like who could walk into, you know, the eye of a hurricane and shut it down? Right.
He hits the reset button.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's a plan in action.
Totally.
This is what we have to do.
And it's just like all bravado. He just rushes in, and he's so that character that we saw in 08th MS Team. But then we kind of see a different side of him, you know. He breaks things apart in a very, you know, as only he could. And then we see him in the office, and he's a little subdued, and he's a little more real with Solari, and he's like, you know, levels with her a little bit, which shows that they have a past and that he respects her abilities, and there's a reason he's putting her on this special assignment. And I think for fans, that was probably, they were not expecting him to walk on and solve some things. So we tried to do little fun things like that. I don't know if it made it into the final cut, but our young pilot, who, you know, may or may not be piloting a Gundam, he's playing a little handheld game when we first meet him. and it's actually a little Haru game. I don't know if there's an over the shoulder.
You see him playing a handheld,
Yeah.
but I don't think we see what he's
Yeah, I don't know if it ended up in, but like we try to put fun little Easter eggs like that. And our storytelling in Requiem is pretty, it's pretty intense. And you can't really see a Haru bouncing around in that, right? It just thematically doesn't fit. But we were like, well, we got to put Haru in there somewhere. And so we'd say, well, so if you could look over the shoulder, if there's like an alternate take or something, the game that our pilot is playing is like a little kind of 16-bit looking Haru game. With the streaming model, there's a lot of pressure. You have to, it's like you really have to hook people in that first 5 minutes of every episode, right? You really have to hook people at the end of the episode so they want to go to the next. It is a huge competition for attention span, and I think the best possible way to do that is by, it's like, you're going to want to unravel the mystery. You're going to want to understand what comes next. Are they going to survive? I'm greatly influenced by like great series like, Walking Dead, and, I always thought about shows like that when I was writing, because that was, I can't watch the next one fast enough. How did they do that to me, And so we think about those things when we scripted Requiem. I grew up in 80s. I don't think content for kids at that time was, of course there was some stuff that was pretty basic, but you grow up on those 80s films, they were not dumbed down. They were told in a way in which a 6-year-old, 12-year-old, 18-year-old, 40-year-old, all those levels could enjoy them and not be traumatized, not be confused. And so I always, when I write, try to, there's this term 4-quadrant. I try to write 4-quadrant, but not dumb down for like the younger, because kids are smart, and kids who build Gundam are smart, and Gun Club, they're sophisticated kids who gravitate towards this stuff. So treat them that way. I hope that Solari does that every episode. We were just talking about trying to be sophisticated in our storytelling. I didn't want to just write a show where you know who she is in the first 22 minutes and then move on. As a matter of fact, we very specifically, we keep unveiling little pieces of Captain Solari's background so you understand there's this huge juxtaposition between who she was before the war and who she is in war. And I think it's successful. I think you enter it and she kind of seems like maybe a lot of Gundam characters. Oh, she's tough. She's good in the cockpit. She's in a natural ability at this. She's a force to be reckoned with. And then it's like, oh wait, her husband was killed prior to this. Oh wait, she's actually a single mom and just wants to survive this mess to get back to her kid who doesn't have a father, Oh wait, she was a concert violinist and she was like this brilliant musician. All things that also kind of tie into, some of her new type ability too. It would make sense that, playing a string instrument, if you're a new type, you might be really good at playing that string instrument. So if we did our job right, and that's not for me to say, that's for the audience to say, Captain Solari is a character that is complex and not what you think, and then maybe part of what you think. And I think we had some really successful moments with her. I think that Celia, who voiced her, really brought her to life. And I think you see her different with different people. That's, I think, another good sign of a strong character. The Solari that speaks to Alfie, you see her guard down. The Solari that speaks to her subordinates, she's in control. The scene with her and Haley, when they meet, and Haley's like, we're just standing around waiting for orders because, God, we don't know what's going on. Bam, Solari snaps into captain mode. And then as a result, Haley snaps back into, good soldier mode. Those kind of things to me were, I think, successes of the story, and it was just very I'm very pleased to have gotten to be part of creating that.
And a couple of things that are interesting, whenever you watch those old war movies, somebody always has a trinket of something that reminds them of back home.
Yeah.
She had the pocket watch. She even has her hair clip is a musical note, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of that cue that she likes. No one would have that unless, it was important to her.
Right.
And so that is one of those things that's just, it's an extension of her. She loves music, and here she has this hair clip that you might not even notice was a thing.
Totally.
Which I think is fantastic.
And I hope, I have friends and family who've, gone back to watch it a second time. And that's when you start to catch up on those, catch those. And I think it's a real testament to a project if people watch it more than once. And if they start to unpeel the layers. And they have little details like that. Working with Safe House and with, the Sunrise team at Bandai Namco Filmworks, let me tell you, attention to detail. These are people who debated every bit of detail, whether it be mobile suit, uniform, geography, the way architecture is laid out in the countryside. The details are there, so that makes, I think, repeat viewing pretty cool. And the pocket watch, I was very pleased with everything about it, the way it looked, what it represented, why she carried it, the fact that it's her good luck charm. She hangs on the control console of anything she pilots, and then her journey with that watch kind of ends. I don't want to spoil anything, but where does it go next? One Easter egg, we've talked about it, but I feel like the inclusion of Admiral Keller was just, to me, it was such as a fan, a treat to get to really make a hard connection between us and other beloved Gundam series. To be able to kind of play with him as a character and add to his voice, that to me is kind of the biggest Easter egg of all, which is a character. I think some of the subtleties, some of the other things, hopefully fans pick up on them, and then hopefully new fans will be intrigued by them and then seek out, I would love if someone's like, who is this crazy guy with his shirt open and the trench coat and the crazy hair, and then they Google him or they look at and then they find out, oh wait, he was in another show, and then they watch, Eighth. I would love that. That would be amazing for us. And vice versa, I love that we get to tie into the continuity pretty directly with him.
Right, and so he might not always make the right choices, but what makes him a good leader is that he's able to engage and inspire, his subordinates, right? His team, his army.
Yeah.
And when he first arrives and it's the Mexican standoff that's happening,
yeah.
He immediately quashes all that, but at the same time, he is literally giving praise to the major, like, wow, you really came up with a great plan.
Yeah.
So now he sees that the major's able to see, okay, maybe I was wrong, I'm glad this worked out, but he gets to save face with his team.
Totally.
And then he has that, he's not punching downward, right?
Right.
He's always going up. And then when he let him know that, you don't need to take me to your office, just point me in the direction, I'll figure it out, kind of thing. That also keeps him in line.
Totally.
And then he's able to inspire Solari.
And then we're in the office with Solari, and he's like, yeah, that guy's not.
Right.
He's not bright enough to come up with a plan like that. That had you written all over it. That's a great moment because it says, one, Callern's really good at assessing people, and two, that Callern and Solari have some kind of, they've served. She served under him in some capacity before, and he knows her abilities and respects them, and that's cool, right? Because now our little Requiem for Vengeance pocket of the universe is growing bigger and bigger, and our imaginations are filling in. Oh, well, what skirmishes, did he witness that she was, the Red Wolves kicked ass and stuff like that? So
Right.
How is being a Gunpla builder played in, right? Many ways. I think, we talked earlier about the like the Zaku in the junkyard. You know, I might not have come to that had I not, you know, already spent hours of my life, you know, putting together pieces to make mobile suits. I will tell you something fun that a lot of people don't know, kind of some behind the scenes on the show. So I've built model kits and Gunpla. I had an older brother who was really good at it, and so I was exposed to it by him and his friends. And, you know, I'd like to think the older I get, the better quality I am at building. But you know, I see what people in the community build, and I'm like, I'm an amateur compared to, but I like it. It's good for my brain. I like to build because it's an escapism. You know, when you work in media, you're constantly problem solving. It's like, you know, it's just that part of your brain that does problem solving is constantly being used. And what I like about Gunpla is that there's directions and there's the kit, and I tune out and I just do what it tells me, and by the end of it I have a really cool mobile suit. But the fun behind the scenes that I was alluding to, you know, when we wrote the series, it was during the pandemic. And I'm in the US, the studio and Gundam team were in Japan, and our director was in Germany. And there was never really a great time to do a video call because someone was going to have late nights. And so for a section of the meetings, you know, we were doing story calls from, midnight till 3 in the morning usually, LA time. And, you know, I'd be sitting with my headphones on, everybody else in the house is asleep, and I was trying to stay engaged. Because often it would be like I would just be, at that point on the project, you know, I'm there kind of an advisory of the narrative stuff going on as they talk about production. And to stay awake, I started building Gunpla while we talked. And so I would like, you know, oh, it's 10 o'clock, got my coffee, got one of the kits I'm working on, have the video on, and I would just be building Gundam while talking about making Gundam. It was such a, you know, the pandemic was a really hard time for everyone, and then here I was having just, I was so spoiled, right? Like, I was still working, I was still getting to use my imagination and be creative, and I was getting to do something in my career I never thought would happen, which is work in anime and an established IP that I love. And then here I am. I get to build models, and so I would be building kits, and we would be talking about things like, you know, the way the GM's head would look in Unreal, you know, like the lenses and stuff like that, or how the epaulets should hang off Renee's shoulder, really detailed stuff. And it was just a deep dive into that universe for me. So yeah, I you know, kept my brain and my body awake by building while we talked about this stuff. And a lot of the people I've worked with in my career, in like writers' rooms and stuff, who I really respect, I noticed do things like that. Like, you know, I did story meetings with Dave Filoni, you know, from the Star Wars team, and he's always sketching while he brainstorms, and so it's like, it's almost like a you know, like a fidget toy, or it's like you're occupying one thing, so you're some of your analytical skills can really go deep. It's interesting. So yeah, not to ramble, but it's kind of a fun moment in my career.
Totally get it. We all have our thing that we do, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when I'm doing those things, I am now tuning out whatever someone is telling me.
Right. Yeah, it is a balancing act. Yeah, and you know, if I got to a part that was too hard for the build, I'd just set it down and focus on our conversation. But I think I didn't lead with it. I didn't advertise to everybody I was building because I didn't want them to think I was a total dork, you know. But I think that, you know, they thought it was kind of fun at the end. What themes from Gundam, from the franchise, did we want to honor with Requiem? I think we really wanted to respect what Gundam is at its core, which we've talked some about that, about, you know, war and conflict being the true enemy, and people rising to their best and doing their best to save others or defend what they think needs to be defended. But I think our approach was to look at it through a different lens, and that's how we were different. I think we really tried to respect the rules of the Universal Century and the continuity, but let's just do it through a different perspective. Let's get in the cockpit with the guys that are usually getting wasted off camera and move on. And that, I think, is what made our show unique. What would it be like if you're not that hero in the cockpit of the Gundam? What if that hero is coming for you? And it kind of morphed into a horror movie, and I don't know if that was, I don't think we set out to say, let's do Gundam as a horror film. But if you have someone in like the ultimate mobile suit with like clearly enhanced abilities coming after you, and it just keeps coming back, that starts to turn into, pretty horrific experience. So I think it's, we respected what came before and paid attention to it and just tried to look at it from a different lens.
No, absolutely. And all the surviving cast members are definitely going to need to see a mental health professional.
And I laugh. I shouldn't laugh because that was us being real, right? Yeah.
It was real trauma. Being chased and fearing for your life.
Totally.
It was a constant for literally a whole night. It's like a classic horror movie where
totally,
when the sun comes up, maybe we'll be safe.
Yeah, and then you're not, because there it is on the horizon. It just keeps coming, and it's is it pilot savvy? Is it a new type connection between pilot and Solari? Like, who knows? We don't even have to answer that, because it's at the core, the Gundam is a force of nature that just keeps coming. So, yeah.
It's like a Terminator. Can't be bargained with.
Totally.
Can't be reasoned with.
Yeah, this kid in the cockpit cannot be bargained with.
It will not stop until you are dead.
And then we hear from him, right? And we hear, I can't stop because they won't stop. And that's the horror of war. Is there a character that kind of evolved beyond my expectations with their arc? And we talked a little about this earlier. Major Ronet is a good example of that. He came together as a character by committee. I had a real basic approach on him. I wanted him to be unlikable. I wanted him to kind of represent the kind of bureaucrats that send people into harm's way and don't think about being in harm's way themselves. I tried to play all the Command and Zeon that way, because it is a stereotype. I'm not saying every Command person is like that, but in a show like this or in this universe, we've seen that a lot. And I think to make Red Wolf Squadron more relatable, they're getting orders from people that maybe are not in as much danger as they are. And that is something to explore in this series. But Ronet is one of those people, and then he isn't. We kind of found him and made him more layered as we went along. The Safe House team and the Sunrise team really kind of pushing me and him to be more than just that trope. And I think it ended up being really satisfying. He is what you expect, and then you start to realize he's more than that, and then he's not what you expect. And he does things that downright feel cowardly in one moment, and then he does things that you're like, oh no, okay, yeah, that was pretty badass what he did. So he's complex, and he's arguably one of the biggest antagonists in the series to our protagonist, which is Solari. That she's not only fighting Earth Federation, she's having to fight this guy to get what she needs to survive. And so he ended up being really, I think, much more complex and an interesting character than he started out. and I'm so appreciative for that. And so I'll take all the credit for it if anybody asks, but it was the group. We baked him together. So, the question being, what do I want fans and what do I want audiences to take away from the show? I think just maybe the hunger that I have for that universe. I hope that, I think a lot of folks who have come to watch it already share that love with me for the universe and for the characters and the technology. For maybe fans who have not been introduced to it, or it's like the gateway to Gundam for them, I would be very satisfied if they're like, oh, now I want to go build a kit, or oh yeah, those mobile suits are cool. I think the Zaku got love in a way that you maybe not have seen. A lot of people love building Zaku and are fans of the Zeon mobile suits, but we really got to dive deep in this series on them. There's a lot of talk about the Gundam because it's so interesting and kind of a different exploration of what a Gundam might be like. But the Zaku were really, it's really cool to be in there with them and to see the differences and to see how they work together as a military unit. But yeah, I think ultimately I just hope that we've entertained Gundam fans, entertained new Gundam fans, and continued to light the fire of, and the appetite for more, because, I'm ready for more. So hopefully everyone else is too.